It started with a knock on a garage door, in the middle of a cold autumn night. A man too tired to care, a woman too scared to run, and a child who hadn't smiled in weeks. This wasn't a love story, not at first. It was a story about losing everything and finding something you didn't know you were missing. If you believe in second chances and if you think family isn't just about blood, then settle in. And maybe, if the story touches your heart, hit that like button and subscribe to stay with us. The fire's still warm, and the story's just beginning. The rain had been falling for hours, slow and steady, soaking the gravel road until it glistened like spilled oil. Caleb Rhodes leaned against the doorway of his small repair shop, arms crossed, the scent of grease and wet wood thick in the air. The autumn wind carried a sharp edge, like it remembered winter too well. He wasn't expecting company, which is why the headlights caught him off guard. A battered sedan pulled into the lot, silver, or at least what was left of it, tires, crunching gravel before it rolled to a silent stop. The engine wheezed, then died completely. Caleb waited. No movement. Just steam rising from the hood. Then the door opened and a woman stepped out, soaked, shivering, clutching the hand of a small girl in a too thin coat. "Sorry," the woman said. Her voice was soft, almost apologetic. "We didn't mean to stop here. The car just—" She trailed off as if explaining wasn't worth the breath. Caleb's eyes flicked to the child, barely 5. Big eyes, clinging to her mother like her bones depended on it. The woman tried to smile. "We don't want trouble. We just—" The little girl interrupted, tugging at her sleeve. "Mommy, I'm cold." Caleb didn't move. But something in his chest shifted, just a little. He nodded once, then stepped aside. "You can wait inside," he said. "It's dry." The woman hesitated. He saw it, the weighing of risks. But the cold had already decided for her. She ushered the girl inside. Caleb followed, flipping on the light. The workshop glowed with warm amber, half lit by old bulbs, and the smell of yesterday's coffee. Benches over there, towels on the hook. The girl looked around, eyes wide. She spotted an old radio on the shelf. "Does it play music?" she whispered. Caleb nodded. "Sometimes. If you hit it right," she giggled. The sound cut through the silence like birdsong in winter. "I'm Mira," the woman said finally, unzipping her damp coat. "And this is Sophie." The girl offered a shy wave, then ducked behind her again. Caleb gave a short nod. "Caleb." He crouched by the engine bay and lifted the hood of their car. The smell of burnt oil hit him fast. "It's your radiator," he muttered. "Cracked clean through, probably from running too long on empty." Mira winced. "Can it be fixed?" "With time. And parts I don't have tonight." He stood, brushing, his hands on a rag. "You're stuck till morning." He expected tension. Panic. Instead, Mira just exhaled. "Okay." Sophie yawned and leaned into her mother. "I can make coffee," Caleb offered, almost reluctantly. "There's bread. Might be a couple apples in the drawer. We'd appreciate that." 15 minutes later, they sat at the small corner table. Sophie curled up with a mug of warm milk, holding it like it might melt through her fingers. Caleb watched them quietly. Mira's eyes didn't meet his, but they scanned the room. Like someone used to mapping escape routes. He knew that look. "I'm not going to ask questions," he said. Mira looked up. "But you should know," Caleb continued. "This town is small. People notice things." She nodded, her fingers tightening on the mug. "Then maybe they'll notice less if we leave in the morning." Sophie looked up at her mother. "But I like the music." "It's not working," Mira replied gently. Caleb reached over, smacked, the top of the radio. A fuzzy crackle, then a slow tune and soft piano. Sophie's face lit up. "It works." Mira's smile this time wasn't forced, just tired, but real. Later, Caleb laid an extra blanket on the cot in the back room. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. Mira stood in the doorway, Sophie asleep against her shoulder. "We won't be in your way," she said quietly. You're not. The wind outside picked up, rattling the glass. You fix things for a living, Caleb? She asked. He looked at her. His jaw clenched. I used to. Then he turned away. That night, as the rain kept falling and the house stayed quiet, Caleb sat, in the dark kitchen, mug in hand, listening to Sophie's soft breathing through the wall. They were just strangers. But something had changed. Not a flood. Not a lightning strike. Just a knock on the door. And a man who answered. Not because he wanted to help, but because for the first time in 3 years, he didn't want to be alone. The rain stopped sometime before dawn. Caleb didn't sleep. He sat on the old armchair by the stove, half listening to the tick of cooling metal. Outside, fog clung low to the ground, and the pines lining the ridge looked like brushstrokes on wet canvas. Inside, everything was too still, too quiet. He wasn't used to the sound of breathing that wasn't his own. In the back room, Mira stirred as sunlight crept across the cot. Sophie curled tighter under the blanket, then peeked out, hair tousled and eyes still heavy. "Where are we, Mommy?" she asked in a whisper. Mira stroked her daughter's hair. "Somewhere safe." A pause. "Is it just for today?" Mira didn't answer. When Caleb heard the floorboards creak, he poured 3 mugs, coffee for him, weak tea for Mira, warm milk again for Sophie. Mira stepped into the kitchen first, dressed in the same damp clothes from the night before, though. She'd tried to smooth the wrinkles. "Morning," Caleb said. "Morning," she replied, voice hoarse. "You didn't have to." "Not a problem." Sophie followed her mother a moment later. She looked smaller in the daylight, all knees and elbows in quiet curiosity. She held on to Mira's hand but let go long enough to take the warm mug. She didn't say thank you. But she smiled, and that was enough. The morning passed in near silence. Caleb checked the car again, ordered the part from the next town over. Said it'd take a day, maybe 2. He didn't tell them that he could have patched it with makeshift tools and a little prayer. Something about the idea of them leaving so soon felt too abrupt, too final. Around noon, Sophie wandered back into the shop. Caleb was sorting tools on the workbench. He didn't notice her at first until she reached up and touched a socket wrench like it was treasure. "What's this?" she asked. Caleb glanced at her. That's for bolts. Big ones." She held it like it weighed the world. "Can I help?" He hesitated, then knelt beside her. "Tell you what, you hand me the tools, I'll do the work." Sophie nodded, serious as a storm cloud. For the next half hour, she passed him wrenches like a nurse in an operating room. She didn't talk much, just watched, listened, mimicked the way he moved. At one point, she looked up and asked, "Did you build this whole place?" Caleb smiled, surprised. "Yeah, after my old one burned down." Her head tilted. "Were you sad?" His hands froze on a rusted bolt. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I was." Sophie nodded like she understood more than a child should. "I think Mommy's sad too," she whispered. Then she went back to sorting screws as if she hadn't just cracked something open in him. That afternoon, Mira found them both on the floor, surrounded by sockets and nuts like it was a sandbox. Sophie looked up proudly. "I'm helping." Caleb didn't correct her. Mira offered a look, part grateful, part wary. "I don't want to impose," she said later as they stood by the garage door. "You've done enough already." "You haven't asked for anything," Caleb replied. Still, she looked past him to the tree line beyond the yard. Her eyes went distant, watchful. "Sophie needs quiet. Somewhere still. I thought we'd find that here." "You might," Caleb said, "but not in one night." That evening, Caleb brought out a second blanket. He placed it on the cot without a word. "You're letting us stay again?" Mira asked. "Storm's not over," he replied. She glanced. Outside. The sky was clear, but she didn't argue. Sophie curled up again by the old stove, this time with her head resting against a folded flannel shirt Caleb had left behind. She looked up once, just before drifting off. Are you going to be here tomorrow too? She asked. Caleb paused in the doorway. I don't go many places these days. Sophie yawned. That's good. Later, Caleb stood outside, arms crossed, watching the stars blink above the pines. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Didn't know what Mira was running from. Didn't ask. But he did know this. It had been 3 years since someone had said goodnight to him, even if it was only a 5-year-old half asleep under borrowed blankets. And tonight, he didn't feel quite as empty. Not full, but not empty. The third morning, Mira started helping in the kitchen, not with fanfare or permission, just quietly setting out plates, slicing apples, rinsing mugs under the slow-running tap. Caleb didn't stop her. Didn't ask questions. She moved like someone used to being invisible, but Sophie was the opposite. She sang while brushing her teeth. Talked to Caleb's dog-eared tape measure like it was a person. Named every screw she found on the garage floor. This one's Marvin, she declared one morning, holding up a bent bolt. He's very brave. Caleb looked up from under the hood of their car, lips twitching. Brave how? He holds things together even when everything's shaking. Caleb blinked, then nodded. I like Marvin. That afternoon, Sophie discovered the drawer filled with old Polaroids. She sat cross-legged on the floor, flipping through photos of truck engines, rusted carburetors, a dog Caleb hadn't thought of in years. Then she held up one. Who's she? Caleb glanced down. June. She was laughing in the photo, hair pulled back, grease on her cheek. A summer day, before the accident, before the silence. My wife, he said softly. Where is she now? He swallowed. Gone. Sophie didn't say she was sorry. She just scooted closer, handed the photo back. I think she had a nice laugh. He nodded. She did. Mira had heard the exchange from the kitchen. She didn't come in, didn't interrupt, but that night, as she folded laundry that wasn't hers, she asked quietly, Is it all right that she asks those things? Caleb thought about it. She's 5. 5-year-olds ask. She's had to grow up fast. Mira said. Too fast, doesn't show. Mira smiled, but her hands trembled slightly. She tucked Sophie's shirt into the clean stack like it was something fragile. They stayed another night, and then another. Caleb told himself it was just until the part came in, that once the radiator arrived, they'd be gone, and the house would fall quiet again. But each evening, Sophie helped him sweep the shop floor. Each morning, Mira made coffee and didn't flinch when the pipes groaned. It wasn't comfort yet, but it wasn't awkward either. It was something else. A rhythm. One morning, Sophie drew a picture and taped it to the fridge without asking. It was crooked, messy, 3 stick figures, one tall, one medium, one tiny with orange shoes. Beneath it, in shaky letters, us. Caleb stared at it longer than he meant to. That same day, Mira lingered in the doorway of the garage. I know we're stretching the lines, she said. Caleb didn't look up. What lines? Between safety and more. He wiped his hands on a rag, then finally met her eyes. Safety isn't a line. It's a choice. Mira's throat tightened. What if we choose it wrong? Caleb glanced toward the fridge. Then, at the cot in the corner. Then at the window where Sophie was pressing her nose to the glass watching birds. Then we try again, he said. And we don't run at the first crack. That night the wind picked up, the kind of wind that knocks branches loose and makes the shutters moan. Sophie crawled out of bed, blanket trailing behind her, and padded toward Caleb's room. She didn't say anything. Just stood there in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. Storm keeping you up? He asked. She nodded. He patted the edge of the bed. She climbed up like it was nothing, like this was normal. She curled up under the quilt and whispered, You smell like sawdust. Caleb chuckled. You smell like peanut butter. She yawned. That's 'cause I stole a cookie. A beet. Are you mad? He looked down at her, cheeks flushed, hair messy, trusting him with something he wasn't sure he deserved. No, he said. And he meant it. Mira found them that way in the morning. Sophie snoring gently on Caleb's arm, his other hand still resting on her back like a reflex he didn't know he had. She didn't wake them, just stood there for a moment, watching. Then she turned away, eyes stinging for reasons she wasn't ready to name. Later, when they sat on the porch together sipping warm coffee in silence, Mira finally spoke. "Why are you letting us stay?" Caleb was quiet. Then, "Because you knocked. And I didn't want to be the man who keeps every door locked." She nodded slowly. And for the first time, her shoulders relaxed, just enough to be noticed. The air shifted that week. The wind blew colder. The leaves curled dry and brittle under Sophie's boots. And the quiet that had once felt gentle now held something heavier, like a breath held too long. Caleb noticed it first in Mira's eyes. She'd always had a guarded gaze, but now it flicked toward the window more often. Paused a beat longer when a car passed on the road. The way her shoulders tensed slightly when the phone rang, even if it was just Mac from town. He didn't ask, but he noticed. One morning, while Mira was in the garden pulling weeds from a patch of stubborn soil, Caleb found Sophie sitting on the porch swing, hugging her knees. She didn't greet him. She just said, "My mom cries when she thinks I'm asleep." Caleb paused. "Does she?" Sophie nodded. "She puts the blanket over her face, but I hear it." He sat down beside her. Not close, but close enough. "She thinks she has to be strong all the time," Sophie whispered. "Even when it hurts." Caleb looked out toward the promise tree, its bark still blackened from the fire that had taken half the house 2 years ago. But beneath the scars, new branches were stretching out, quietly, slowly. "Sometimes," he said, "being strong means letting someone else see you're not." Sophie leaned her head against his arm. "She doesn't let people see, not anymore." That evening, Mira didn't eat much. She picked at the stew, eyes distant. Sophie was quiet too. No stories about Marvin the Bolt. No humming. After dinner, Caleb stood by the sink rinsing the bowls. Mira stepped beside him with a towel in her hands, ready to dry. For a long time they said nothing, then she broke it. "I was married," she said. Caleb didn't turn to look at her, just kept rinsing. He wasn't kind, not after Sophie came along. Not once he knew I'd stay. There was a silence between spoon and steam. "I left with what I could carry," Mira continued. "He doesn't know where we are, I don't think. But sometimes I dream he does." The clink of ceramic echoed between them. Caleb handed her a plate. Their fingers brushed. He didn't say, "You're safe now." Because safety wasn't a thing you promised. It was a thing you earned, day by quiet day. Later that night, Caleb sat by the porch, blanket around his shoulders, eyes on the stars. Mira came out holding 2 mugs. "I made tea," she said. He took the mug, sipped slowly. The warmth settled into his chest like something he hadn't realized was missing. "I didn't tell you to feel sorry for me," she added. "I don't." She glanced at him. "I just wanted you to know," she said. "In case one day he comes." Caleb didn't look away from the dark tree line. "If he comes, he won't be the first man I've had to stand against." There was a long silence. Then Mira whispered, "But will you stand for us?" The question lodged deep, not because it demanded an answer, but because it already knew the one he hadn't wanted to face. The next morning, Mira found Sophie drawing, again, this time with a red crayon and a page filled with uneven circles. "What's that?" she asked. "It's a fire," Sophie said simply. "And us. Running." Mira's heart sank. "Sophie, but we're okay," the girl added quickly. "See, Mr. Caleb's there too." Mira looked. 3 figures, one tall, one small, one with a big square for a body and wild hair. "He's holding the water hose," Sophie said. "He puts it out." Mira swallowed hard, then kissed her daughter's forehead. In the garage, Caleb worked silently on the truck that had been rusting behind the shed for over a year. He didn't need it, didn't plan to drive it. But today, for some reason, it felt important to make it run again, like maybe they might need it someday. That evening, as twilight stretched across the fields, Mira joined him again on the porch. Sophie had fallen asleep early, worn out from a day of drawing and chasing chickens behind Edna's house. They sat in silence for a long time. Then Mira said softly, "I don't want to run again." "You won't have to." She looked at him. "Don't say it if you don't mean it," he met her gaze. Steady, quiet. "I don't say things I don't mean." Mira's breath caught. Then, for the first time since they met, she leaned her head lightly on his shoulder. Just for a second. But it was enough to change the air between them. The following week unfolded like a slow exhale. For the first time in years, Caleb began each morning to the sound of footsteps that weren't his own. Mira's soft rustle in the kitchen, Sophie's chatter echoing down the hallway, the clinking of spoons, the hum of something almost like a song. He didn't name the feeling. He didn't dare. But it wasn't loneliness. Not anymore. The radiator. Part arrived on Thursday, packed in cardboard and tape. Caleb opened the box, stared at the metal, and quietly set it aside. Mira noticed. "You're not fixing it?" "Not today." She didn't press him. They didn't talk about what that meant. Sophie started calling the garage the workshop. She'd built a cardboard toolbox from an old cereal box and carried it around like she was his assistant. Most of her tools were crayons and sticks, but she took her job seriously. "This one's for fixing sadness," she told Caleb once, handing him a purple marker. "You draw with it when things feel broken." He took it without a word and kept it in his shirt pocket the rest of the day. That Friday, Mira found a small flower blooming near the garage. Just one, bent, yellow, stubborn. She called it ours. They planted it in a pot near the porch. Sophie added a popsicle stick with the word hope scribbled in red crayon. Caleb smiled when he saw it, but he didn't say anything, just watered it every morning. The townspeople started noticing. Edna sent over fresh bread wrapped in cloth. Sheriff Doyle swung by under the excuse of needing an oil change, but stayed long enough to eat Mira's pie. Even Mac, the old carpenter, offered to help fix the squeaky screen door, grumbling that every child deserves a porch that doesn't slap like a shotgun. Sophie gave him a hug. He didn't complain after that. One evening after supper, they sat on the steps watching the sky turn gold. Sophie curled up next to Caleb, her feet bare, face sticky with peach juice. "Do you think birds ever forget how to fly?" she asked. Caleb looked down at her. "No, but sometimes they rest a while." Mira smiled softly. Sophie nodded. "I think we're resting." Later that night, Mira stood in the doorway of Caleb's room. "I haven't felt still in years," she said. He looked at her, said nothing. "You scare me a little," she added. That made him lift an eyebrow. "Not because of who you are," she said quickly, "but because when I'm around you, I start to imagine staying, and I don't know how to do that without waiting for something to break." Caleb's voice was low, steady. "Then we build it strong, and if something breaks, we fix it." Mira didn't respond right away, but her shoulders relaxed, just slightly, and for the first time, she stayed to watch the stars with him instead of retreating to the cot. The next morning, Sophie brought Caleb a piece of toast shaped like a heart. "It's burnt," she said proudly, "but that means it's full of courage." He took it with both hands and ate every bite. He didn't realize how fast the comfort had grown until he heard a truck rumble down the road that afternoon. It wasn't the mailman. It wasn't anyone. From town. It stopped a little too slow. Idled a little too long. Mira froze by the sink. Her hands went cold. The color drained from her face. Sophie looked up from her drawing. "Mommy?" Mira forced a smile. "It's nothing, baby," but Caleb was already reaching for the wrench closest to him. He stepped outside before anyone could stop him. The truck pulled away after a few minutes. Just a stranger lost on the wrong road. But the crack had been made. The silence after was heavier than any storm. That night, Mira tucked Sophie into bed with a trembling hand. Caleb stood by the doorway, unsure whether to speak. Sophie looked up and whispered, "Are we going to leave again?" Mira's breath caught. Then Caleb stepped in. He crouched beside her, took her small hand in his calloused one. "No," he said. "Not tonight. Promise." He looked at Mira, then back at the little girl who had drawn him into her world with crayons and toast and questions he hadn't known how to answer. "I promise." The piece cracked on a Tuesday. It was nothing dramatic, just the way Mira froze when the phone rang, the way Sophie dropped her fork, the way Caleb watched them both like a man waiting for the ground to split. It rang 3 times, then stopped. No voicemail, no callback. But Mira didn't touch her food again that night. The next day, Caleb noticed tire tracks by the fence that hadn't been there the night before. He walked the property line twice. No broken branches, no knocked gates, just a presence like someone had stood there watching. At breakfast, Sophie poked at her eggs. "Are we going to leave again?" she asked softly. Mira's hand twitched. Caleb caught the look in her eyes before she could hide it. "No, sweetheart," she said. "We're just being careful." Sophie looked at Caleb. "Are you scared?" He paused, then answered with a small, steady shake of his head. "Not of anyone who hides behind trees." That afternoon, Mira packed a bag, only a small one, just enough for essentials. "I'm not running," she told Caleb, folding a shirt. "I didn't ask." "But you were thinking it." He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "I was thinking it looks a lot like last time." Mira's voice stayed calm, but her eyes flared. "You think I want this?" "No," he said. "I think you're tired and scared, and don't believe someone could stand still when everything tells you to run." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Mira whispered, "Do you really think we're safe here?" "I think you're safer here than out there." That night, Caleb didn't sleep. He sat by the front window with a thermos of coffee and the wrench Sophie had named Marvin tucked under his arm. It was heavy, useless in a real fight, but it made her feel better when she handed it to him. "You, hold this, okay?" she'd said, "just in case bad guys are allergic to metal." He almost laughed. Almost. The dog barked sometime after midnight. Caleb was on his feet in seconds. A shadow moved near the barn. Too fast to be an animal, too slow to be wind. He stepped onto the porch. Every board creaked under his boots. No flashlight, no gun. Just a man with nothing left to lose. "Who's there?" he called. Silence. Then, "Didn't mean to spook you." The voice was calm, southern, slick. A figure stepped from behind the yow. Barn, hands raised, tall, clean jacket, new boots, a man who didn't belong. "Name's Rick," the stranger said. "Looking for my wife." Caleb didn't move. "This is private property." "I bet," Rick said, smirking. "But see, my wife's been gone a while. Took my little girl too, and some folks say she might be out this way." Behind him, Caleb heard the screen door open. Mira's breath caught. Rick smiled wider. "Well, hell, there you are." Caleb stepped forward, blocking Mira from view. "You need to leave." Rick's smile faded just a little. "I think I'll wait for Mira to come say hi. She's always been good at saying sorry." Caleb's jaw tightened. "I'm going to count 2, 3. You'll want to be in your truck by 2. Rick took a step forward. "You her new boyfriend or just the local mechanic playing hero?" 1. Rick's face twisted. He wasn't used to being told no. "Y'all really think hiding in this dump is going to fix anything?" 2. Rick opened his mouth again, but Caleb's stance shifted just slightly. Not a bluff, not posturing, a man who had nothing left to protect but this. And that made him dangerous. Rick spat on the ground. "Tell her I'll be back." Then he turned, walked slowly, got in his truck and drove away. Inside, Mira was shaking. Sophie was pressed into the hallway, silent as a breath. Caleb closed the door behind him, locked it, then turned to them. "He's not coming back tonight," he said, but no one believed it. Later, when the house was still again, Mira stood in the doorway to the garage where Caleb had gone to cool down. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Yes," he replied. "I did. You could have gotten hurt." "I've been hurt." Mira's eyes brimmed, then barely above a whisper. "I'm tired of costing people things." Caleb walked over to her. Not fast, not sudden. He stopped just short. Close enough that his voice could land gently when he said, "You don't cost me anything." She reached for his hand hesitantly. He let her, and for a moment, the fear broke. Not gone, but cracked wide enough for breath to come through. Sophie joined them, the next morning on the porch. She had a crayon drawing folded tight in her fist. "What's that?" Caleb asked. She opened it slowly. A tall figure, a small one, and in the middle, Mira holding both their hands. Above it, scrawled in crooked letters, "We stay." It started, with smoke, not thick, not black, just a thin, curling thread rising from the edge of the woods behind the garage. Caleb smelled it before he saw it. His instincts, dulled from years of quiet, kicked in hard and fast. He bolted through the back door, boots crunching on dry leaves. Behind the tree line, a small fire burned in a half circle, leaves crackling, brush smoldering. Contained. Intentional. Not lightning. Not accident. A warning. Inside, Mira held Sophie tight, crouched behind the kitchen counter. The smell had reached them too. Caleb stepped back in, breath sharp. "Pack a bag. Now." Mira's eyes were wide. "We can't. I'll buy you time," he said. Sophie clutched her drawing of the three of them, crumpled now, but still intact. "Are we running again?" she asked, voice shaking. Caleb knelt, met her eye. "Not this time." Rick appeared 20 minutes later. The front gate creaked open. No knock, no announcement. He walked across the yard like he owned it. Sleeves rolled. A cigarette in hand. A gas can still in the back of his truck. "You're not hard to find when you make a home out of someone else's," he called. Caleb stepped onto the porch, wrench in one hand. "Not Marvin. The real one. I told you to stay gone." Rick smiled. "And I told you she's mine. You lost that right the day you laid a hand on her." Rick flicked the cigarette. It landed on the dry grass. "You sure you want to do this?" "No," Caleb said. "But I will." Mira stepped out behind him. Her hands shook, but her voice didn't. "You don't get to scare me anymore." Rick's eyes narrowed. "You think this place can save you?" "Him?" She didn't answer. She stepped forward, past Caleb. Caleb reached out, stopped her gently. His voice was low, calm. "You already survived him once, you don't have to again." She looked at him and nodded, then stepped back. Rick moved fast. He lunged up the steps, hand raised, but Caleb was faster. The wrench met Rick's ribs with a sickening thud. He stumbled, gasping, but swung back, catching Caleb in the jaw. With a fist hard from years of rage, they fell into the yard, dirt and fists and firelight. Sophie screamed. Mira rushed to her. Caleb rolled, pinned Rick to the ground. "I've lost too much," he growled. "You're not taking what's left." Rick shoved him off, staggered to his feet, but sirens echoed in the distance. Sheriff Doyle had seen the smoke. Rick cursed under his breath, eyes darting. "Next time," he hissed. "No," Caleb said, blood on his lip. "There won't be." The cruiser pulled up just as Rick sped off, tires throwing gravel. Doyle jumped, out, gun drawn. But Rick was already disappearing into the tree line. "You all right?" he asked. Caleb nodded, then turned to Mira and Sophie. Sophie was crying. He dropped the wrench, walked to her, dropped to one knee. "I told you I'd keep you safe." She threw her arms around his neck and didn't let go. That night, the fire line was doused. The grass smoldered, but the house still stood. Caleb sat on the porch steps, knuckles scraped raw. Mira brought a damp cloth and sat beside him. "Why'd you do it?" she asked softly. He didn't look at her. "Because the minute He showed up. I realized I'd rather rebuild this house 100 times than watch either of you walk away. She touched his hand, and he let her. Sophie came out in her pajamas, blanket around her shoulders. She climbed onto Caleb's lap without a word. He held her like he'd done it 100 times, and maybe, in some version of his heart, he had. She whispered, "Did we win? Did we?" Caleb looked out into the dark where the fire had tried and failed to take root. "Yes, sweetheart," he said. "We did." The fire didn't touch the house. Not directly, but the flames licked close enough to leave their mark. Ash drifted through the yard like black snow, the wooden fence behind the garage gone. Half the garden scorched. The corner of the workshop singed so badly, Caleb had to knock it down with his own hands the next morning, boards cracking one by one. Sophie cried when she saw the burnt patch where her hope flower used to be. "We can plant another," Mira whispered, kneeling beside her. "But it won't be the same," Sophie said. "No," Mira agreed, brushing ash from her daughter's cheek. "But it'll still grow." Inside, the house smelled like smoke. Not overwhelming, just enough to remind them of what almost happened. Mira spent the morning scrubbing walls. Caleb patched the screen door for the 3rd time. Sophie didn't speak much. She carried her drawings from room to room like she didn't trust them to stay safe in one place. When she saw Caleb tossing burnt lumber into the fire pit, she stopped beside him. "Is the house hurt?" "A little," he said. "Will you fix it?" Caleb looked at her. Her hands were wrapped around her crayon box, knuckles white. "I'll fix what I can," he said. "The rest, we grow back." That night, the silence returned. Not the peaceful kind, the heavy kind, the kind that fills your ears like water after something crashes. Mira sat by the window, hands in her lap. Caleb made tea, poured 2 cups, and set one in front of her. "You should hate me," she said after a while. "You almost got hurt because of me. I don't hate you." She looked at him. "Why not?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "Because sometimes people come into your life when you need them most, even if they bring a storm with them," she swallowed. "Do you wish we never showed up?" "No," he said. "I wish I'd opened the door sooner." Later, Caleb found Sophie in the garage, sitting cross-legged beside a pile of salvaged wood. She looked up, eyes rimmed red. "I don't like fire." "Me neither," he said gently, crouching beside her. "I thought it was going to take Mommy again." "It didn't. But it tried." He nodded. Sophie leaned into his chest without asking. He wrapped his arms around her, his rough hands careful on her small back. "I don't want to move again," she whispered. "We're not. You promise?" Caleb paused, then kissed the top of her head. "I promise." The next morning the townsfolk came. Edna brought tools and cinnamon rolls. Sheriff Doyle returned with plywood and nails. Mac hauled in leftover siding he was going to toss anyway. Even grumpy old Earl from the gas station showed up with a crowbar and more attitude than sense. Nobody said much, but everyone stayed. By mid-afternoon, the broken wall of the workshop stood again, crooked, stubborn, solid, just like before. Maybe better. Sophie taped a new drawing to the fridge, 3 figures again. But this time, the house behind them was brighter. The stick trees had little birds, and the hope flower had come back. Bigger, taller, yellow again. She showed it to Caleb with a quiet smile. "Do you think if I draw it, it'll happen?" Looked at the picture. "It already is." That night, Mira lit a single candle and set it on the porch railing. Not for light, not for prayer, just for marking what had been lost and what had not. She and Caleb sat beside it, silent. "I was scared," she said. "Not just of Rick, but of staying, of letting you mean something." "I know," Caleb said. "You still do." He looked at her. "You do too." She reached out, fingers finding his. No fanfare, no declarations, just warmth and choosing. Inside, Sophie was already asleep, clutching a sock doll Edna had sewn her out of flannel and buttons. Her drawing, the new one, flapped softly on the fridge as the wind blew through the open windows. The house, for all its wounds, held, and so did they. A week passed. Then two. The burned wood was hauled away. The fence behind the garage stood again, a little crooked but strong. The workshop smelled of sawdust and new beginnings. Sophie planted a new hope flower in a pot beside the porch. This one was purple. She named it Promise. "We won't let this one burn," she told Caleb. "We won't let anything burn," he replied. The rhythm returned, but it was different now. Caleb still woke before the sun, but he wasn't alone in the quiet. Mira brewed the first pot of coffee. Sophie filled the house with questions, everything from "Why is the sky blue?" to "Can you build me a bed made of marshmallows?" She still drew pictures. More now, dozens of them. She taped them across the walls. Family portraits, the house, the workshop, a version of Caleb with a cape. "This one's you," she explained. "But you can fly." He chuckled. "Never tried." "You should," she said. "But not too high. I want you to come back down." One morning, Caleb drove Sophie into town to buy more crayons. Mira stayed behind. Her first time alone in the house since the fire. She didn't pace. She cleaned, hung curtains, rearranged books, repaired. A tear in the quilt. When they returned, Caleb paused in the doorway. The place looked lived in, not just visited. And when he saw the hooks by the door, 3 of them, he knew she was saying something without saying anything. Later that day, Mira stood in the backyard watching Sophie feed the chickens. Caleb joined her, rubbing sawdust from his hands. "She's different now," Mira said. "She feels safe." Mira looked at him. "So do I." He didn't respond right away, just watched Sophie dance between the hens, laughter carrying in the wind. "I never thought I'd have this again," Mira added. "You don't have to lose it." A long pause. Then she whispered, "I don't know how to stay." "You already are." That evening, the community returned. Not for emergency repairs, but for dinner. Edna brought pies. Sheriff Doyle brought folding chairs. Mac brought a crooked bench and a jug of something that wasn't quite cider. They sat in the yard. Under string lights Caleb had hung that morning. Sophie made everyone wear paper crowns. Caleb wore his without complaint. "This town's different than I remembered," Mira said softly. "Maybe you're different now," Caleb replied. She looked at him. "No, I think I'm just finally becoming myself." After dinner, Sophie climbed onto the new porch swing and declared, "This is my favorite day ever." Someone asked, "What about yesterday?" "That was my other favorite." Caleb laughed. So did Mira. Edna winked at them both and said, "Looks like she's got a home now." Mira looked at Caleb and didn't look away. Later that night, when the guests were gone and Sophie was asleep, Mira stood at the foot of the porch. She turned to Caleb. "We could leave tomorrow," she said. "You could, but we're not going to." He stepped toward her. Not rushed. Just enough. Mira's voice shook a little. "You're sure?" "I'm not sure about many things, but I'm sure about this." He took her hand. She didn't let go. Inside, the candle from the night of the fire still sat on the windowsill. Unlit now, but there. A reminder not of danger, but of what they'd chosen to stay for. The first frost came early that year. It touched the edges of the porch railing, silvering the steps, crisping the grass in the yard. Sophie woke before dawn to press her fingers to the cold glass, eyes wide in wonder. "Look, it sparkles," she whispered. Mira wrapped her arms around her daughter's shoulders. "It's winter saying hello." Sophie tilted her head. "Will it stay long?" "Long enough." By late morning, Caleb was in the garage sanding the final panel for the new dining table. He'd built it from wood salvaged from the old fence, the one Rick had burned. Each groove, each knot held a history. But now under his hands it was becoming something different, something meant for gathering, for meals, for stories, for family. Sophie helped finish it. Well, helped mostly meant she painted a yellow flower on the underside and declared it a secret happy spot. Caleb didn't sand it off. He ran his fingers over it each time he checked the legs for balance. That afternoon, Mira found him stacking firewood. She didn't say anything for a while. Just watched the slow, measured way he worked, sleeves rolled up, breath misting in the cold. "I used to think staying meant getting stuck," she said finally. He looked over. "And now?" "Now, I think it means choosing." She smiled. "I choose this." Caleb nodded. His voice was quiet. "So do I." They planted another tree that day, not where the old one had been. This one was in the back, near the swing Sophie used, close to the house. They dug the hole together. Mira held the sapling straight. Sophie packed the earth gently around its base. "What should we name it?" Sophie asked. Caleb looked at her, then at Mira. Mira whispered, "Let's call it Promise, just like the flower." Sophie grinned, and Caleb reached down, pressed his palm gently to the young bark. Dinner that night was simple: soup, fresh bread, laughter. The new table held all three of them easily. The chairs didn't match, and the light above the kitchen hummed faintly, but none of it mattered. They were warm, fed together. After Sophie went to bed, Mira lingered at the table. She watched Caleb clean the mugs, his movements quiet and steady. "Did you ever think this was possible?" she asked. "Not really." She stood, walked over, and rested her hand on his back. "Thank you for not closing the door that night." He turned, met her eyes. "I think I was waiting for someone to knock." Outside, frost crept back across the grass. But inside, the house held warmth in its bones. Mira lit a candle again, not for fear, not for memory, just to mark the day. A soft glow in the window that said, "We're still here." That night, Caleb tucked Sophie in. She was almost asleep when she whispered, "We're not going anywhere, right?" "No, sweetheart," she smiled. "Okay, 'cause I already picked my room forever." He kissed her forehead, turned out the light, and stood for a long moment in the doorway. This wasn't the life he'd built before. It wasn't the life he lost. It was something entirely new. Something worth staying for. Later, on the porch, Mira joined him, blanket over her shoulders. The stars above were clear and sharp. "Tomorrow we fix the shed roof," she said. "Yeah. And after that, the swing frame." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You know what I love about this place?" "What?" "We don't promise forever, just tomorrow. And then we show up." He smiled. "That's enough." She took his hand, and for the first time, not because they had to, not because they feared the past, but because they chose it freely, they stayed. Some stories don't end with a grand goodbye. They end with quiet mornings, the sound of laughter in the kitchen, and the simple choice to stay, one day at a time. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you of someone you once loved, or the family you chose, then stay a little longer with us. Tap like, subscribe, and let's keep telling stories that heal, stories that remind us we're never truly alone. We'll be right here when you're ready for the next one.